So I'll go to my talk, which is on cataract management after LASIK surgery. So cataract usually happens quite a bit long after LASIK surgery. So it is a relatively late complication. And when it does happen, it does pose a lot of problems, a lot of challenges rather, which were more earlier. And now as time has gone by, as technology has developed, it has become better managed. So what the challenges are is basically that you're dealing with a patient who has corrected his vision using LASIK so that he could see better and get rid of glasses. Now, it is this patient that's presenting to you with cataract, and obviously he doesn't want to go back to his glasses unless absolutely necessary. The second thing is that he has high vision expectations, because after LASIK, his vision became absolutely clear. What he was not seeing over the ages, he started seeing, and he expects the same kind of result after LASIK and with the minimum possible, after cataract surgery and with the minimum possible aberrations. Then, of course, what the surgeon faces is the multiple types of inaccuracies in IOL power prediction. Now, such a patient may also, the surgeon should keep in mind that such a patient may actually need an entire series of bioptics procedures. The patient had undergone laser refractive surgery or a phakic IOL before, and you're prepping the patient for a cataract surgery, but always keep in mind that following the cataract surgery for a residual refractive error, you may need to go back to a refractive enhancement, either a topo-guided one or a laser vision correction for a small amount of myopia, hypermetropia that may be residual and may be annoying the patient. So one should be prepared for that. Now, what are the sources of error in intraocular lens power calculations? This has been much discussed even during this meeting. So we know that the corneal power is not what it shows up on topography or keratometry, because the central cornea, which is actually mapped by all the keratometers, the central 2.5 to 3 millimeters of cornea actually is much more flatter if it has been a myopic treatment, much more steeper if it has been a hypermetropic treatment than is assumed by the topographer. And of course, the anterior cornea to the posterior cornea relationship has changed from the flattening of the anterior cornea and the thinning of the cornea. And because of all these reasons, again, the formulae that we traditionally use, that is the regression formulae, the theoretical formulae, they don't hold good because they also depend on these assumptions of keratometry. So what do we do next? Of course, there have been measures because of the sheen flow imaging, OCT guided axial length and anterior chamber measurements, and multiple formulae that have come across using historical methods or double K method, Malani, you name it. And a compendium of these can be found at the ASCRS website in the ASCRS post-refractive surgery IOL calculation, which is different for RK, myopia, and hypermetropia, and gives very good results. I have found the same results when using the Barrett's Universal 2 formula also, especially with all the latest biometry instruments, where even a regular lens power calculation quite often matches what is provided by the ASCRS website. Then certain biometers also have post-refractive surgery calculators, which again give lenses corresponding to what you get from the ASCRS website. So now once what lens to use has been decided, the planning of the surgical technique takes place. Now, why is it important that you plan a bit? Because now here you're talking about a cornea that is not intact, that's not pristine. So you have lines of dehiscence if you're talking about radial keratotomies. So usually you see 8 of them, but they have surgeons earlier who have done much more, and you have an extremely weakened cornea, which has gone down, let's say 80 to 90% of the corneal thickness. And therefore any invasion has to be very guarded. Of course, you have flap margins in LASIK, and you should always identify the hinge, so where you know that the flap is attached to the rest of the cornea, and try to avoid traumatizing the flap or elevating the flap by mistake during any of your corneal incisions or opening up of the side ports. Then, of course, the phaco parameters, though I don't keep them always very low, you need to be a bit guarded in that respect as well. You don't need to, especially in a cornea which is actually a virgin cornea and only 10%, and then a scarred cornea and the rest, as in a radial keratotomy. You wouldn't want extremely high intraocular pressures with a lot of turbulence in the anterior chamber, just to prevent the incisions from dehiscing. And dehiscence has been noted in many cases. Regarding fluid in the interface, this can sometimes happen if the intraocular pressure is able to drive fluid into the interface, which is always a potential space even years after the flap has healed. Then, of course, IOL centration is very important, especially if you're using a non-unifocal or a multifocal intraocular lens in these procedures, where the visual axis has to correspond to the central axis of the lens. Now, this is a post-refractive surgery cataract patient, and this is a wavefront imaging of the patient. You can see the high order of astigmatism and the higher RMS values. So here the lower order errors are highlighted, and equally present are the higher order aberrations. So this is what I meant by placement of an intraocular lens and exact centration. You can see how the centration has to be marked in this patient by using the Purkinje images and the center of the visual axis. So usually in Varian and such imaging instruments, you have a central line, and the Purkinje, the anterior and the posterior Purkinje images have to correspond to the center of the line, which makes sure, and this has to correspond to the central zone of the lens, which makes sure that the lens is centered so that the aberrations are minimized. Now that would result in post-cataract surgery, better wavefront, where you can see that the aberrations have considerably reduced. Now, what do you do if the ablation itself, the primary ablation itself, is decentered? So here you can see an ablation that is pretty decentered, and there is flattening of the peripheral cornea, paracentral cornea rather than central cornea. This is a post-relax patient, and in these cases, you may need to warn the patient of a topo-guided enhancement following cataract surgery, where you just need to smoothen out all the irregularities of the cornea to provide a low aberration vision to the patient. Now, this is a case of radial keratotomy cataract, and you can see all the markings on the cornea that look pretty scary from this, mid, just paracentral region all the way to the periphery. So here, what I'm showing over here is the wound on the cornea. You can see that the wound has to be placed between two of these scars, so that, and a bit more limbal than cornea, so that you don't at any point during wound making touch these scars on the cornea, so that chances of the scars dehiscing are minimal. And in case there are more lines or more scars than 8 on the cornea, that may be better to do a scleral tunnel. That should be an option kept in mind. So here is a radial keratotomy patient who is undergoing flax, and you can see how the wound is placed between two of the radial keratotomy marks. The phaco parameters are a bit on the lower side, and the phaco is a bit in slow motion because I don't want to create too much of turbulence in the anterior chamber. Of course, the flax procedure has caused the lens to be pre-chopped, because of which the energy used and the manipulations have reduced, rather than when it's done in a full-fledged. And the cataract is not of a very high grade, as you can see over here. And now here comes the placement of the intraocular lens. What is to be noted here is the centration of the lens. Now, because the rhexis is an automated rhexis, it is perfectly at the center, and placement of the lens is very much aided because of the good coverage from all sides by the rhexis. So it lands typically in the center itself. So this is how the post-operative picture looks like. Now, what do you do when you have an ICL with a cataract? So in a phakic IOL with a cataract, you may need either an ICL explantation, removal of the cataract and replacement with an intraocular lens, or you can retain the ICL and then continue the surgery and put in an intraocular lens, where the ICL acts as a piggyback lens for the intraocular lens after the end of the surgery. So now here is a post-ICL cataract, and before the cataract procedure, the ICL is being removed. Now here, what you need to take care of is not the lens underneath, which you need to do in an eye without cataract, where you're replacing the ICL because of a high vault. On the other hand, here you need to take care of the cornea just to make sure. So there should be a good coating of viscoelastic between the ICL and the cornea. And the ICL can usually be removed by the same 3 mm incision that it was inserted through. And after cataract surgery, an IOL can be placed exactly in the same position. Now, without explantation, so here you have an ICL sitting there, and because the patient was a high myope and desired multifocal intraocular lens, so I retained the ICL. Again, the cornea has to be taken care of extremely, and all the maneuvers are done in such a manner that you try not to hurt the ICL, not to damage the ICL, because you're trying to retain the ICL inside the eye. And coming from the sides, you can see how the phaco port as well as the side ports would go exactly where the optic of the ICL ends, avoiding the haptic. And the phacoparameters are kept as normal here. So after cortex aspiration, the intraocular lens is placed in the bag underneath the ICL, and then the ICL is tucked back into the sulcus. So it was sitting in the angle so long as the surgery was taking place. So once the visco is thoroughly aspirated and you're sure there's no visco in the interface between the phakic IOL and the IOL, once that is ensured, then the ICL is tucked back into the sulcus, like you see over there. Centration again is maintained using the Purkinje reflexes. So meticulous planning in each of these conditions, whether you're dealing with radial keratotomy or whether you're dealing with LASIK, PRK, or a phakic IOL, meticulous planning pre-operatively, proper calculation of the intraocular lens, and exactly how you intend to follow up the patient in case of a residual refractive error should always be kept in mind. And suppose you try to keep the patient a bit myopic because they're always used to seeing near, especially a short-sighted person. But always remember that sometimes it may be easier to correct a hypometropic refractive error in an already thinned cornea. So even if the patient gets to be a bit hypermetropic, there's no need to be dismayed, because it may be easier and more intelligent to clean off a bit from the peripheral cornea rather than from the already thinned central cornea. Thank you very much.